Welcome, fellow enthusiasts of the unexplained, to Sasquatch Watch Radio. If you're as fascinated by the elusive, legendary creature known as Bigfoot, you've found your new home here on Sasquatch Watch Radio. We're diving deep into everything Bigfoot. From thrilling eyewitness accounts and compelling scientific theories to the latest research, expeditions, and even a little bit of the folklore that surrounds this enigmatic being, we'll explore it all. Whether you're a seasoned squatcher or just curious about the giant hairy dude in the woods, you're in the right place. Get ready to have your perceptions challenged, your curiosity piqued, and maybe, just maybe, you'll start looking at the shadows in the forest a little differently. So settle in, turn up your speakers, and let's journey together into the heart of the Sasquatch mystery. This is Sasquatch Watch Radio, and the hunt for truth begins now. Here is your host, Gary Kendrick.
Hey everybody, today is August the 25th, the year 2025. I'm your host, Gary Kendrick, and you're watching Sasquatch Watch Radio. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Tonight's going to be a little bit different show. We're going to be doing a topic show, and the topic I chose for tonight is ethics, and there's a couple things that's kind of led me to this. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit more as we get on into the episode. But if you guys notice I'm not in the chat as much tonight as I usually am, that's because I've kind of got my hands full. I've got quite a bit to go over. But the first thing that I'd like to start off with is ethics. Ethics are moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. And that is exactly what we need to go over as a group. There's a lot of things that goes on. I just like to start off with honesty. And we all know someone, or we believe we've been led to be, somewhat duped by someone. And it's the same in our research. When you get into your research, everybody's had hoaxes. We've heard fairy tales of fantastic adventures, and we've had outright lies about sightings and encounters. And the Sasquatch field is hard enough without people taking the ethics of what we're doing seriously. It's a difficult situation that we're in because we're dealing with a being that science doesn't necessarily recognize, and from all intents and purposes that I've seen, that it doesn't necessarily want to try to recognize it. For whatever reason that is, it's a difficult thing to get into. And it's a lot harder. I'm trying to read through some notes here. How can you expect for your peers to take what your research is doing seriously if, you've been involved in some type of hoax, or you've, led someone astray on something? And that's the problem. That's the norm in the Sasquatch community, is to, if I find an area that has a lot of activity, I don't have a problem so long as the person that, might own that area doesn't mind for people to know, where it's at, what's going on, and things like that. But most people will try to hide what they have, and that seriously hurts our scientific endeavor into this. We've all had at least once in our research, we've been, told these stories. I saw Sasquatch riding a giant hog, and it had a mohawk like Mr. T, and it took off and run through this and stole my can of Pringles. And that's kind of funny, but, we all hear these unusual stories. So honesty is the best policy. When you come into a situation where, you have a person that's telling you their experience and things like that, I feel that being honest with yourself and being honest with your group is the best policy. They might come in and come up with some fantastical things that they saw, or they think they saw, or they think that may have happened to them, and that creates more problems. If you go in and say, "Oh, well, this dude's just out there, I don't know what's going on." Now, we've all dealt with some of those people too, but honesty is the best policy when it comes to your research. If you're into your research and you're serious about it, and you do over the board, honest research, that's best for the community. And in the Bigfoot community, we should hold each of ourselves responsible for the highest level of honesty in our research. Because if we don't, we're kind of the low IQ hillbillies that all the real scientists think that we are. Another intricate part of that is integrity. And integrity at times is kind of lacking. Like I said, we've all had hoaxes pulled on us, some of them bigger than others. We could advance the study of the enigma of Sasquatch so much farther if honesty and integrity in our research was more commonplace than it is, as it is right now. Which brings me to another good point that I want to talk about is, I'm not going to mention the researcher's name, but they had some serious footprints that they believed were Sasquatch related, and they had those footprints studied, and the study come back that they were 100% human. And this particular researcher came on and did a YouTube live and told everybody, hey, they just said that the tracks that we found were 100% human, and it wasn't what we was looking for. And that is the honesty and integrity that we all need to try to have. That's the honesty and integrity we need to strive for. If our evidence is good, we need to tell everybody that it's good. If there's problems with our evidence, then we need to go back and say, hey, this is not what we thought it was. There's problems with this. This is what we need to try to look for to get good evidence. Respect for human participants and society. This is a big one. In this world today, I kind of believe that we went from more of a lean on me society to a more of a it sucks to be you type society. I try to be honest with everybody, and I try to be really supportive with everybody, and I try to work good with everybody. But that's not always the case. Some people they don't try to maintain that straight facts. Thomas Steenberg, stick to the facts, only the facts. It's a perfect thing to do. When it comes to respect for participants in society, human participants are witnesses, property owners, fellow researchers, your family, your friends. We all have a tight-knit community that we work with. I don't know of any researcher that doesn't kind of rely on somebody else. We look at each other's evidence. We talk to each other about things that we find. We talk about things that are important in our research and things that are important in other people's research. That's the kind of thing that we have to have. You have to work together. That's respect for, other researchers. We owe it to the participants in our research the highest level of respect. Without them, we wouldn't have anything to investigate. I had a sighting. I saw what I believe. I've been on several research expeditions where we've been on someone else's property and investigated their encounter stories and things like that. And if you don't have respect for the people that's giving you the encounter story, then there's nothing for us to investigate. People are going to recognize the fact that you don't respect them for what they have to say. They're not going to continue to try to work with you. They may even, limit your access or completely shut off your access to a certain area. So that's something that's, important to keep in mind, is to, present that high level of respect there. We all had bad days. That's a given. Everyone has a bad day. When you're having a bad day and you might have a witness that you need to interview or something like that, it probably wouldn't hurt to call them and say, hey, can I reschedule? I've had something that come up. With respect to participants also, telling an encounter story to somebody is a hard thing to do. I had a real hard time when I first tried to tell my encounter story. It's a hard thing to tell somebody because every time you tell that story, you kind of go back and relive parts of it. And some people have a really difficult time with it. And if you don't show them that respect there and be supportive, then you're not going to continue to have that resource to work with. And it's an important resource to have. Like I said, without our encounter stories, we don't have anything to work with. Another thing, too, when it comes to respect for our human participants, it also includes property owners. Okay, when it comes to property owners, and this may be different in other states and things like that, but I can tell you like my own experience. We had a faux pas one time where we was actually on someone's property that we wasn't supposed to be there. And I didn't know that we wasn't supposed to be there. And I don't think the guy that took us there knew that we wasn't supposed to be there. But there was kind of a big deal made about it. And that taught me a very valuable lesson. You have to take your time, check out all of the property boundaries, especially if it's private property. When it comes to private property, people are particular about the property. Nobody wants somebody to come in and invade their home, their personal space, their property, and, not have, a good rapport with them. Along with the personal property owners, when you do come in and you have this access to this property and it's owned by a private person, keep in mind, too, keep your research area clean. If you're going in there and you're camping for a week or so at a time, this is not a time to be discarding trash just wherever, or this is, don't go in and cut fences, or don't go into sections that the property owner tells you, hey, don't go in there. Maintain that respect and work with the resource that you have. You can't go in and just, like I said, invade someone's personal space. They've worked hard for that. They've spent their money on that. And, for a lot of people, that is their safe space. And if you go in and invade the place, trash it up, destroy property, make a mess, even like with fires, I try to be really clean with a fire when we make a fire somewhere, because you don't want to leave, the property in a state of disrepair. You want to show that respect to that person that owns that property, because that is a valuable resource that you have. When it comes to state or federal or interstate property, it's the same. There's rules and regulations that can be pretty strict. And personal property or, public property, either one, you should make sure that it's going to be okay to go out and do things like call blasting, wood knocking, setting up tents, anything that might disturb other people that's trying to use this recreation area or everything else. Leave it cleaner than you found it, Digger Dog. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Try to do things the proper way. I work at a campground during the summers, and I have seen the bad end of this. Trash left laying around, campsites, messed up. Stuff gets trashed out everywhere you look. It's not a good look. And, when we're doing these things, this is the impression that we're leaving on the public. if we don't clean things up, if we don't keep things maintained, then we're the problem that we're all trying to avoid. Property owners are a great resource, and that goes for state and federal property also. That's a great resource that we can use. Everybody has a story about an encounter that's happened on like national forest property. Uwharrie National Forest with Squeaky, that's one of my favorite encounter stories. Things like that. Make sure that you're keeping these areas clean and usable for other people. And like I said, don't do things that might upset other people that are there. There's nothing like laying in your tent or your camper at 12 o'clock at night, and then somebody rips off an Ohio howl at a high decibel and wakes everybody in the campground up. So let's try to keep that in mind. Another thing, too, to check about is any type of equipment that you may be using, such as audio, visual, photos, anything like that. If anybody has, worked with, some people don't want their photos taken. That's just straight up. Some people don't want game cameras on their property. That's, something that you have to deal with. It may be against the law to use game cameras or something like that on some of the public property. Audio recordings. Some people don't want audio recordings because, maybe they're talking about something they don't want anybody else to hear about. So, make sure you have permission from these landowners, if you can get permission from like the state or federal government to do these investigations on this state, federal, or interstate property or whatever, make sure that the things that you're going to do are permissible and allowed in that area, because, if you don't, you can end up on the wrong side of the law on this. And I'm going to tell you, like I said, I had a close encounter, and I learned a valuable lesson to make sure that, you have the permissions, you're in the right place. It can lead to fines, confinement. Nobody wants to go to jail because they were trying to find Bigfoot. That's all there is to it. Now, Mick may want to go to jail. I don't know. And another thing too, and Digger Dog brought up this point right here too, is, have some respect for the land, and you would be surprised at how much more access that you can get, which is exactly what happened to us at a property where we was researching. We went with these people that we were on their property. We made sure that everything was kosher that we was doing before we did it. And it kind of got out in the community that, hey, there's Bigfoot researchers on this property. They're doing some research, and they're great people. They're taking care of everything and all this other stuff. And then we had other people to come up and say, hey, listen, we've had encounters on our property. Would you guys like to come over and look at it? So you may open up more opportunity for yourself as a researcher or as a group to get access to different properties, more encounter stories. You might even build up a network in that area where you receive, information on maybe movements. Maybe somebody saw one at this property at 1 o'clock, and somebody saw another one a mile away at 1 o'clock. So you might get some numbers or something like that, or somebody may have seen a family group or whatever. So that might give you an idea or estimates as to how many animals may be in the area, what kind of conditions they're using, and things like that. And, when you do build up that kind of mutual respect between you and the property owners, then you can get a lot more done. Like I said, nobody wants to have somebody come in and just tear it up. Yep. Treat it as if it were your own personal moonshine still, David. I understand. No, it was not a drunk tank, Mick. It wasn't. It was a trespassing charge that we got worked out. Which it's a it was a hunting preserve that I didn't know we didn't have permission to go on at the time that we went on it. And it's a really nice hunting preserve for upland bird hunting, which I've really gotten into here in the past little bit. And I probably can't go back there and hunt. You kind of learn your lessons as you go. We should be respectful too with our groups. I like to joke, I like to laugh, I like to cut up, and I like to play with people. But when it comes down to it, I have the utmost respect for anybody in the field that's actually out doing honest, hard research. It's hard not to respect somebody like that. When you're out there in the field and you're working and, somebody from another group or somebody from even another country or something like that comes up and they say, hey, I've been watching what you've been doing. I think you're doing this great, blah, 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 whatever. Or they may come up and say, hey, I do this a little different than you do. I do this. Well, if you just go to jumping on to them all the time, that's not showing respect. You can't expect to get respect from our peers in the Sasquatch community if you don't show some respect. And I find that more and more in the community now than I think it was when I first started. Which I'm a really lucky individual. When I first started into research, I got with Sasquatch Watch of Virginia, which Billy run the group at the time, and everything was I learned a lot from a lot of people. I had a lot of great experiences. I got a vast amount of knowledge, and it was really helpful. And without that, and their opinions and how they do their research and things like that, I would have learned, like one of my first big faux pas was the red circle. I had a image that I was asking questions about, and I drew a red circle around it, and that was the first thing they said, don't draw a circle around anything. And now I understand why. Because I can't tell what you're talking about with the circle on the photo. Your point of view is different than my point of view. So it's good to show respect to other groups and things like that. There's a lot of people that's watching the show. I have a lot of respect for these people. They have a lot of knowledge. I think Thomas Steenberg's on tonight. Wonderful researcher. I have a great amount of respect for Thomas. Great amount of respect. And, it's incredible how when you show that respect gets returned to you. And that's the main thing that I want to get in on that. If you're not respecting, the other groups, the property owners, the encounter people, none of that, then you're not going to get any more information. Your resources will dry up and dry up rather quickly. And another thing too is, even our friends and our family. When I first got into studying Bigfoot, my son took a lot of flack from the other kids at school because, hey, your dad's crazy, he's out looking for Bigfoot. And, and that really bothered him. And he told me, he said, Dad, you just need to quit. They're picking on me. You just need to quit. And I told him, I said, just because they're picking on you, son, doesn't mean that I'm doing something wrong. They might not understand what I'm doing. So, that doesn't mean that what I'm doing is wrong. And I said, if it's bothering you, sit down and talk to me about it. And let's try to work things out. And that's the same thing too with, our other family members, our spouses, younger people, your parents, things like that. Always get in there and have the respect for your family, because they're as much a part of your research as you are. They're the people that's, there to hold you up when you're down. They're the people that's always going to be there to support you. So, have that respect for them. There's no reason not to try to give, the utmost respect to everybody that you deal with. Kind of on to my next point is ensuring scientific validity, which is something that I talked about earlier. We should all be mindful that a great bit of our evidence is not validated. A prime example is the Patterson-Gimlin film. I believe 100% that that is an authentic film. There's a lot of other people that believe that out there. Of course, then on the flip side of the coin, you have a lot of other people that think that it is not authentic. With that being in mind, the Patterson-Gimlin film, at this time, as far as I know, has not been proven to be factual, and it's also not been proven not to be factual. So we have that anonymity with our evidence. A lot of it that we have is not necessarily validated. And, that goes with footprints, hair samples, photos, things like that. And that's where a lot of the hoaxing and things come in. It's harder to get that scientific validity because a lot of hardcore scientists don't want to look at it. But when it comes to that, if we're out and we're finding evidence, such as footprints or hair or whatever, that evidence should be taken to an expert in that field. And I'm not necessarily, I'll just come right out and say it. I'm not talking about somebody else that's in the Sasquatch field. I'm talking about an expert, a scientist, a doctor, something like that. Somebody that has the credentials and the alphabet letters behind their name to prove it. I'll just kind of give you an example of that. I've been paying taxes most of my life. Property taxes, vehicle taxes, income tax, state tax. I've been paying taxes most of my life. Now, with that being said, I may not be your best resource to fill out your tax forms. Take it to somebody who has the credentials and knows what they're doing. If it's a hair, take it to somebody that's an expert in the field of hair or DNA or, like Dr. Meldrum with the foot morphology or something like that. That is the resources that we need to be using. That's the resources that we need to fall back on and continue to use in our research. Without that scientific validation, we can't get anything proven. It's almost impossible to get any of our evidence, even with the best ethical practices, proven if we're not, utilizing these resources. And before I get into the next thing, I'd like to go on here, and we have a song, The Ethical Dilemma, for tonight. So let's hang on.
The compass spins, the camera set, another blurry figure, a mystery man. We hold the plaster, we trace the print, 1,000 stories and not one hint. But in the shadows a question waits, beyond the footprints and the hopeful gates. Is it enough to simply find a beast, or is there something more to guide the quest? We'll go beyond the grainy video, beyond the cast that we all know. There's an ethical dilemma that we face, a deeper purpose in this ancient chase. How do we act? What code do we keep? While secrets of the forest run so deep, it's an honorable hunt, an exciting quest, putting our morals to the ultimate test. What if the creature is more than we know, a sentient being in the woods below? With a family, a language, and a sacred home, do we leave them be, or do we roam? The code of conduct, the quiet plea, a silent promise to the wild and free, to honor nature, to show respect for a life we still cannot connect. We'll go beyond the grainy video, beyond the cast ready to face what's right on our path. We'll go beyond the grainy video, beyond the cast, and we all know there's an ethical dilemma that we face, a deeper purpose in this ancient chase. How do we act? What code do we keep? While secrets of the forest run so deep, it's an honorable hunt, an exciting quest, putting our morals to the ultimate test. An honorable hunt, an exciting quest, it's more than just finding, it's putting ourselves to the test.
All right, that was a good one. Okay, the next thing that I want to get into, and I just mentioned that I'm 5 pages deep into notes that I've got to try to go over, so I'll try to do my best to get through them. I've had to put my glasses on because I've lost my place several times. But the next topic that I want to talk about as far as ethical research is minimizing harm. And Mick, I'm going to touch on something that you spoke about earlier. I can do a full show just on minimizing harm. Like I said, I'll keep it as short as I can. Minimizing harm is not necessarily meaning physical harm. I'm not an advocate of trying to shoot one, to kill one, just to prove it to science, because I believe that we're dealing with either, some type of human species, or some type of ancient ape species, or something like that. So I try to veer away from this. Oh, let's shoot one, let's take one, let's do this, let's do that. But what I'm talking about with minimizing harm is something I want to talk about. When the first tribes in North America were contacted by European settlers, diseases that were fairly common for the European settlers that came in here, that they had developed immunity to, the native tribes in North America had absolutely no immunity to. And those diseases wiped out millions of natives. And it's not only just, the diseases that you have to worry about. It's things like, over the time, if you look at these ancient tribes, like in Africa and Russia and all these other places, these ancient tribes of people, they're still living in an ancient way, but the tribes in Africa use tires to make sandals out of now instead of skin. Almost all of these primitive tribes now use metal tools instead of their traditional hand-knapped stone tools, because it's easier to get, they last longer, and things like that. And we've altered their perception of themselves by introducing these things like, man-made materials, metals, diseases, things like that. And another thing too that I want to talk on to this is habituations. People split the line on habituations, and I'll just kind of give you what my ethical thoughts on habituations are. And when it comes to habituating Sasquatch, anytime that you're using food as a catalyst for these habituations, I believe that you're creating a dependency is kind of where I'm going. You're creating a dependency by the Sasquatch for this food, because let's be honest, okay? Who wants to go out and really work for it when it's ready and available and being handed to you? So that's my thing. If you're dealing with habituation, that's something to think about. These animals can become dependent upon that food. And when they do, if something happens, let's say you miss a week or 2 weeks, they're hungry. They're going to come in and start tearing things up. And it's the same with habituating bears, which is a big thing in my part of Virginia now. We have a a really large bear population that's building up. And with this bear population that's building up, people are kind of habituating bears to humans, and sometimes it's completely by accident. People may leave like their animal feed out on the front porch or the back porch or somewhere where it's accessible, and these animals come in and they get that food, and they may get it this time, they may get it that time, they may get it 4 or 5 more times, and then you decide, hey, I've had enough of buying it, I'm going to do something else with it, so they can't get to it. With that being said, once you put that stuff up, or once they close, that's a good point, Thomas, the dumpsters. Once the open dumps and dumpsters and things are closed and the bears can no longer access that food, then they're going to start coming in more into your area. They may even try to get into your house. There's several people that's had bears that's tried to get into their house here because they have gotten food off the porch or gotten at this, and the people have decided, well, we're not going to do that anymore. The bears become dependent on it. So now they're trying to break in to find where is it at. And, it's a touch and go situation. Now, it's bad enough with a bear. Okay. I think maybe the world record black bear might be 900 and some pounds. That's a huge animal. Huge animal. But when we're dealing with a Sasquatch and its capacity for learning and intelligence and things like that, this could be a really, really serious situation. Another thing, too, when it comes to, these habituation sites, gifting stations are one thing. You might be gifting something, and again, I'll use the squeaky footage, like these little rubber ducks that Squeaky would squeeze out in the woods. Okay, that's it's kind of a cool thing to put out because, they said you could hear the Sasquatch out in the woods squeaking that little duck. But it's made out of hard plastic. What if they tried to eat it? What would that do to their system? Things like that. So, you got to kind of consider what you're trying to do in your research. And like I said, I have a problem with habituating. Some people don't. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. If you think that works, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Continue what you're doing. Me personally, I don't, I'm kind of against it because, there's a lot of harm that comes with it. Like I said, you can accidentally poison the animal. Maybe they don't have a tolerance to the plastic. Maybe, they drag it around through the mud or whatever and get some type of infection or something. You never know. So that's my thing. I kind of like to think that, take only pictures and leave only footprints. That's kind of a great way to be. And that's kind of just my own thoughts on it. Like I said, if your thoughts on it are different, that's wonderful. I'm not taking anything away from what you're doing. That's a great deal. And 2, I'm a hunter. And when it comes to hunting, with just the introduction of your scent, your own human scent into that area, and people can say, hey, listen, I'm a clean hunter. Nothing wins me, nothing hears about me, anything like that. That's wonderful if you think that. But eventually you're going to have to urinate somewhere. And that's spreading your scent. And with the introduction of our own human scent, we can influence things and change things in any animal's habitat. You might, with just the introduction of your scent, you could change things like bedding areas and bedding times, breeding areas, breeding times, feeding areas, etc. All of these things can be, changed just with the introduction of your own scent. And that's something else, that a lot of people don't even think about. You might completely take an area that's a hot spot of activity, and just by going in there and, you got 25 people with you, and, you got 10 peeing over here and 10 peeing over there and 5 people wandering around, and, you're going to change that entire area just with the introduction of your scent. You're going to see decreased animal activity. There'll be decreased time that the animals will be out because they know you're there. And, that's something when it comes to minimizing harm, you could actually alter birth rates and things like that just with the introduction of your own scent. Another thing too, and it really has to be brought up, is when it comes to minimizing harm, is we need to be especially aware of minimizing harm for ourselves and other people in our research group and area. And the reason I say that, and I go back to it from time to time, is we had a couple of researchers that died last winter, just right at Christmas. They got hit with some inclement weather. They weren't prepared for it. When you're out researching, be prepared. Your best practice for minimizing harm to yourself and people in your group is to be prepared. Be prepared for, weather. Be prepared for medical emergencies. Pack plenty of food. Pack plenty of water. Have plenty of medical supplies. Have a reliable communications device. Sat phone. Something like that. Cell service is not perfect. It's not everywhere. You may not have service. And another thing, too, is, me and Billy talked about this on another topic show, is your cell phone is not a flashlight. It has a flashlight on it. But that's not going to last you any amount of time in an emergency. And once that phone goes dead, it's hard to find an outlet out in the middle of the woods to plug into to recharge it so you can get another flashlight. Reliable light sources. Always have some way of creating a fire to keep warm. That's always important, whether it's a couple of lighters in your pocket or, whatever. Something that you can do to keep a fire source so you can stay warm. That is a very important thing. Even in times like right now, we're at the end of August, getting ready to come into September. And, it's really nice during the day. It's really warm here. And it gets a little cool. It was 55 degrees this morning, which can lead to some temperature-related injuries also. So a fire source may be important. And two, it kind of, in another sense of saying it, it kind of keeps the boogeyman away at night. If you're trying to survive somewhere, even if it is in a warm area, it's better to have that fire that kind of gives you that little bit of light and kind of deters some of the wildlife from coming in on you. So, that's something to always think about. Be prepared. The next subject that I want to get into, and this is actually kind of a hard subject to talk about, and it's avoiding conflicts of interest and the manipulation of evidence. Those two things go hand in hand. Okay. We all know that there's been lots of shows on television, on everywhere, where they're out in the woods, looking for Bigfoot, looking for this, looking for that, whatever. But the main thing with those shows is most of that is for entertainment. I'm just going to be honest with you. If anybody out there that's not a researcher or hasn't been on a real research trip, 90% of the time that you spend in the woods is just you in the woods with nothing happening. Nothing happening. 10% of the time, you might have some activity. So, most of the time you're just sitting there. Well, when it comes to avoiding a conflict of interest and the manipulation of evidence is, the conflict of interest is if you are like writing a book, or if you are, Dynasty Meets Bigfoot, that's a good one, Thomas. If you're out there and you're trying to do good research, and let's say you've got a book out, okay, if you're out there doing good research and, whatever, keep in mind that, the conflict of interest with that might be that, hey, I'm really going to push my agenda on what I think, Sasquatch is, where I think Sasquatch is, how often I think Sasquatch does this. I think Sasquatch may move this way, Sasquatch may move that way, whatever. The conflict of interest is when you try to step into that and, use your research to push the point that you're trying to get across. It's not always necessarily a money thing, because I'm going to be honest with you, I've done this for a long time. I have not made one dime doing any type of Bigfoot research. I've spent a lot of money doing Bigfoot research, but I've not made one dime doing it. And the manipulation of evidence, too, when it comes down to it, a footprint that's a hard piece of evidence to overlook. Okay. I found a few footprints over the years, and it's a hard, when you look at it, something was there. Something put his foot down there, something made an impression, something moved through here, whatever. Now, the manipulation of evidence may be that maybe, it moved through here and left 2 footprints. But I can't tell anybody that it made 2 footprints, so I'm going to go up here and kind of exaggerate and make it look like there was more. Manipulation of evidence. Once you start to manipulate the evidence that you're trying to present as factual, then I honestly don't know if there's any recovering from that. I don't know if you can go back and say, hey, I found this trackway. The trackway didn't go 3 miles like I said it did. It was 4 footprints, or it was 2 tracks, or whatever. And, the tracks wasn't even really that good. Once you do that, I don't know if there's any recovering from that. I mean, everybody from that point on, once they discover that, hey, you've manipulated that evidence that you got. Once you do that, everything that you have from that point on, it could be the very best Sasquatch evidence that has ever been presented. And everyone that looks at it will think, oh, hey, he hoaxed them footprints. So that's the thing to keep in mind. If you manipulate evidence, then any evidence that you get after that automatically becomes suspect. And when it comes to like evidence too, some people just want the evidence for themselves. Okay. They don't want to have it studied. They don't want to do anything else with it. It's here. I've got this. That in itself is another form of manipulating evidence, because if you have a footprint that you cast and it's a really good footprint and you don't have it sent out to be looked at like we talked about earlier with our scientific validation, then you have a really nice paperweight. That's all you have. Because it's never been proven to be anything other than a plastic or plaster cast. And it's the same thing too with hair samples or anything like that. I can tell you right now that I have a Sasquatch tied up in my barn that I go out and feed every day, and I sit down and we play chess and all this other stuff. If I can't prove that to you, I am manipulating the evidence that I am trying to present. So manipulation of evidence, good point, Thomas. Manipulation is another form of hoaxing. And, with that being said, that's a hard thing to overcome. And kind of my last thing is misconduct. And I know I've rattled on quite a bit, and I'm probably sure I bored some of you guys plumb to death. But when it comes to misconduct can come in many different shades, different directions, anything like that. Misconduct could be, you start a rumor against this Sasquatch organization. You starting a rumor saying, oh, well, they faked all their footprints. I know they faked all their footprints. So you're kind of casting some shade on them. This is what they're doing. I don't agree with it. Whatever. When you do that, when you have that type of misconduct, then again, too, we're actually separating ourselves from the scientific community that we really need to be working with really closely. I would actually like sometime in my lifetime And I'm sure there's a lot of you guys out there that say the same thing. I would like to see sometime in my lifetime when almost all of the Sasquatch groups can get together and say, hey, we're going to start doing this. And people work together. And we don't have people, using misconduct to try to lead people away from something, or lying about other groups, or spreading rumors about this researcher or that researcher, or hoaxing their own evidence. That's the largest misconduct violation, in my opinion, that you can have in this field of research, is to alter evidence, to hoax evidence. I have my encounter story. I've said it several times on the show. I'm sure you guys are probably sick to death of hearing about it. But that's what I saw. And, for real, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I'm not going to try to change my story to make it sound more fantastic. Bigfoot didn't reach into my Jeep and steal my Pringles. I didn't steal Bigfoot's Jack Link's beef jerky or anything like that. So, misconduct, if we all act, if we all play well together, it would be a whole lot easier world for all of us out there. I know I've kind of bored everybody to death, but I'd like to give everybody in the chat this opportunity at this time. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to throw them up in the chat, and I'll answer them as quickly as I can. I have lost the feed. There it is. So if anybody has any questions, now would be a good time. Come on and ask them. Thomas, was that a pretty big deal in Canada when they closed the open dumps back in the 70s? That's a good question. David says, where would you send samples? That's something that each group, I think, should have, is some type of resource where you can reach out. Dr. Meldrum, for starters, has said, hey, if you have a footprint, blah, 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 whatever, get it to me, mail it to me, bring it to me, and he'll look at it. That's an open resource, which is great. At one time, in the Sasquatch Watch of Virginia, we actually had I don't remember if they were a vet or if they were a veterinarian tech, but they did some hair, looked at some hair samples to try to determine what they were and things like that for us. So, David, each group, has open resources. And two, in your area, if you can, if there's a college or anything in your area that has, like a science department or whatever, you might be able to go there and ask them. I can't think of that one DNA guy from North Carolina right now. Is it Orcutt? Is that his name, Dr. Orcutt? I'm not for sure. But he's had several samples that, he's working on this DNA study with, and I'm pretty sure he would probably be willing to look at some of them if you could contact him. I think his name is Darby Orcutt, I believe. Digger Dog says he's good. Digger, I'm glad to see you in here tonight. Thomas says, yes, it was a big problem for about 5 years. Was it just based on the bear activity, Thomas? Because that's something that I, as far as the habituation thing, Thomas, that's one of the things that I think about a lot, is that, with, like here in my part of Virginia, we have steal their big green dumpsters, and people put their household trash and things like that in them. And at one time, they weren't covered. And the bears really got habituated into these dump sites, even in these big steel dumpsters. And they got really habituated to that site. You know, it was easy food; they could get into it. Another thing too was that once people realized that these bears were using these dump sites as a food resource, as a habituation site, then they started coming in and, oh, let's see if I can hand feed this bear this cheeseburger. Or, oh, look at the cubs. Let me see if I can get out and pet these cubs. And again, a wild animal is a wild animal. You know, it may be the cutest little bear that you've ever seen before in your life, but, you know, it's still a bear. So keep that in mind. And it's the same thing with, you know, Bigfoot. I believe Bigfoot habituations is a disaster waiting to happen. If we don't have any more questions, Thomas, I'd like to say thanks for the information on that. I was really interested in that. If anybody else doesn't have any more questions, I think I'm going to go ahead and end the stream for tonight. I appreciate everybody that's been on. Now, this is probably not my best show, but this was something that I've thought about for a long time, and I think it was important to get out, you know, the information that I tried to bring out tonight. And if nothing else, it gives us all something to think about and consider, you know, when it comes to our own resources. Are we using ethical research, or are we kind of stepping out to the side of it? With that being said, like I said, I think I'm going to go ahead and end the show for tonight. I appreciate everyone being on tonight. If you guys have any other questions, I can be reached at Facebook, or you can message me. My email is garykendrick@yahoo.com. If you'd like to send me an email, appreciate everybody being on tonight. And let's all continue to try to be ethical with our research and respect each other. And with that, I'd like to say good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to Sasquatch Watch Radio. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Stay connected. Don't miss our next exciting show, airing next Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. To stay updated, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'd also love for you to join our Facebook page at facebook.com/Sasquatch Watch Radio and check out our website at squatchradio.com. Share your stories and feedback. Your feedback means the world to us, so please give us a thumbs up on our shows and let us know what you think. Have you had an encounter? If you've had a sighting or encounter, we want to hear from you. Reach out to us through our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page. And if you're interested in being a guest on our podcast, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next Monday night.
Sasquatch Watch Radio, the official podcast partner of Big. We've got groundbreaking news that'll shake the very foundations of the cryptid community. Sasquatch Watch Radio is incredibly proud to announce our exclusive podcast partnership with Big, the Bigfoot Investigative Group. For the first time ever, you'll get an inside look into the world of Bigfoot investigations through the eyes of true American heroes. Big is comprised of an elite team of United States Navy SEAL veterans, United States Marine Corps veterans, and United States Army veterans, bringing their unparalleled discipline, strategic thinking, and investigative prowess to the hunt for Sasquatch. Prepare for an auditory adventure like no other. Starting this Monday, tune in at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for thrilling new interviews and occasional updates directly from the Bigfoot Investigative Group. Sasquatch Watch Radio is honored to be the official podcast of Big's Navy SEAL team, and we can't wait to share their incredible work with you. Don't miss out. Monday nights at 9 p.m. ET, only on Sasquatch Watch Radio.
Thanks for tuning in to Sasquatch Watch Radio. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Stay connected. Don't miss our next exciting show, airing next Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. To stay updated, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'd also love for you to join our Facebook page at facebook.com/Sasquatch Watch Radio and check out our website at squatchradio.com. Share your stories and feedback. Your feedback means the world to us, so please give us a thumbs up on our shows and let us know what you think. Have you had an encounter? If you've had a sighting or encounter, we want to hear from you. Reach out to us through our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page. And if you're interested in being a guest on our podcast, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next Monday night.